Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Idea Gen Global Podcast with George Sifakis.
I'm George Sifakis. In a world overflowing with noise, there is one forum where the world's smartest voices connect, where visionaries sit at the same table as innovators, and great minds don't just talk, they act.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
The left versus the right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
Good afternoon, everybody. On a Saturday afternoon before Christmas, we have another installment of the left versus the right for you. And it may even be the left versus the right versus the unbelievable. I am joined by my friend and often co-host James Flippin. And James got here just in time. I'm sorry I messed up your Saturday.
Yeah, no,
he's here just in time.
Look, these things happen. You know, it's obviously that time of year as well when people's schedules get a little fouled up and stuff like that. But it seems as though you're still a little hot under the collar about whoever it was that was originally going to be sitting in this chair.
And that's what I wanted you to ask me.
Okay.
So I have a friend. His name is Londell. And he works with one of the elected officials in Harlem. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, he said this about 3 or 4 weeks ago. He said, I met this woman. She is as conservative as you could even think about. She is to the right of right. Anything that doesn't involve, her point of view is a negative for her. Mm-hmm. And, but she's looking to do more than just podcasts. She's looking to maybe get into radio or maybe TV. And, I want to know, would you take some time and talk and have a conversation with her? I said, sure, I'll be happy to do it. So I had the conversation with her. She was okay, James, but the thing that I kept getting was whatever it was, she seemed to want me to do it with her, like a weekly show. Like maybe she'd be the weekly left versus right person, something like that.
Right.
So I kind of was not as interested as I thought I would be if it was someone who was really just, let me in. I'll sweep the floors. I'll clean up the studio.
Yeah.
She didn't have that point of view. And so I called Londell on Thursday, and I said to him, I think I'm going to be doing the left versus the right. Let her know because she could be the right.
Right.
She'd come down here and be the right. And I even showed her resume to Kevin, who, for those of you who are listening in, works here. And, everybody thought it was a great idea. And then last night around 10 o'clock, he calls me up and says, she doesn't want to do it. I said, why doesn't she want to do it? She doesn't think she likes WABC. I said, how could she not like doing WABC? WABC is right up her alley for the things that she talked about.
Yeah, you said she's right of center politically.
Exactly. I mean, and his description was way to the right. And I said, but look, whether she likes WABC or not, she's never done a television show. All she's ever done is a podcast. This program is is on the air, but we're also recording it, for other purposes.
Right.
Why would she walk away from this opportunity? He says, I don't know. I don't know what got into her. And so I said to him, please tell her that I said, at some point in the future, she'll hear my name. But at no point in the future do I ever hope I hear her name again. And so, she had one of these weird names. Her last name was Brown, but Latina Brown. That was her name.
Okay.
It sounds like a description.
Yeah.
But
it does.
Anyway, I had to get this off my chest. I want to apologize to the audience. We have a number of things to talk about. But, sometimes, as we all learn, no matter what jobs we do, if you can just square yourself with what's going on, you feel better. So you have, by giving me these few minutes, have made me feel better.
Well, good, Governor Paterson. I want to see you obviously reoriented and kind of like back on your axis, because anything that throws you off, you got to do something to get yourself back in shape, back into position. But in terms of a person that is right of center to that extent, I mean, you're almost making her sound like she makes William F. Buckley look like Karl Marx. In that respect,
that's pretty much how he described it.
Yeah, in that respect, I wonder if maybe, I mean, look, we don't have to spend too much time on the hypothetical, but I wonder if that's some sort of like not happy the way the mayor's race went down here, or how we covered that, or I mean, I don't know.
If she'd bothered to come down here, we would know why she.
I guess that's true.
Has these feelings, but she didn't, and her time is up.
Yeah,
that's it. I'm not going to mention her name again.
Maybe she's sort of like other people in the so-called MAGA sphere, where they're so upset about the tweet that President Trump sent out this week about Rob Reiner that she just said, I cannot possibly in good conscience come on and defend the political right at this point.
I got the impression that she would think of a reason why it was okay. She's dead set.
Well, okay.
Trump.
All right.
Now,
in that case, I'll be the one that finds the reason to say it's okay.
Okay. So the thing is that President Trump did write that. And as you know, James, I'm a Democrat. I did not vote for President Trump, but I am not a crazed Democrat.
Yeah, you don't you're not infected with TDS, Trump derangement syndrome.
Exactly. And, but, and there are other times he said things, and I know it was the wrong thing for him to say, but it was funny. So I just appreciated it.
Right.
But this was a mass murder. The stabbing of a married couple, the husband, Rob Reiner, of course, 78, his wife, Michelle, 68, in their home apparently right after the party they had gone to at Conan O'Brien's house. Mm-hmm. And you have a couple of days before they could even catch up with the son. This kind of thing, if we have any morality in us at all, it didn't make a difference who the victims were. That's what I think the president totally misses. Mm. It's not that someone he doesn't like had a misfortune. It's that with this kid's drug problem, the drug problems all over the country, and we're going to get into his signing legislation about drugs in a few minutes. But I would say that you just can't do that. It's hard for people to look at you with a straight face and not think that you're just a vicious, intolerant person.
Well, I mean, look, there's a couple of things I would say in response to this, Governor Paterson, and obviously most people did feel a certain type of way about that social media post in which, Trump was reacting to that murder and kind of focusing more on the way Rob Reiner behaved in life as opposed to the act itself, which, most of the time when you're talking about putting out a tribute or a thought on someone, you would actually focus on their life and not the way they died. I guess in this instance, because it was such a heinous, tragic situation, most people in that immediate moment were really focused on the way he died. And that's understandable. I also think that there are multiple things happening at the same time, right? I read that tweet, made me feel bad, kind of hurt my feelings, not the way that I would have gone about it.
Right. At
the same time, there's a lot about President Trump that I would never do, that I would never be able to do. I'll put it to you this way, Governor. There's people who do radio different ways, right? Our colleague, Greg Kelly, the longtime sports radio champ, Mike Francesa, even a guy like Howard Stern. Kind of mean to callers, kind of almost antagonistic to the callers that they take. I can't do that. I can't do that and make it funny, make it effective, make it entertaining. That's just not my style, but everybody's got their own style. President Trump is a guy who is, in fact, a pugilist. He's a fighter. Any given moment he wakes up, he's got vinegar in his veins and he's ready to get after it. And you saw this Vanity Fair article smear job that came out over the last couple of weeks in which Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, said he's got an alcoholic's personality. Well, what does that mean? Because President Trump has never drank before, according to what he said, and I believe him. So that means that you have a little bit of belligerence in you. You have a little bit of beer muscles in you. You have a little bit of I can't be stopped, and I dare you to tell me that I can be stopped. So Rob Reiner, as horrific as it was that it happened the way it did, and we've heard about the schizophrenia that his son was dealing with, and Conan O'Brien allegedly was telling people not to call 911 the night before, which that was obviously not a great decision. There's a lot of different instances and failures that happen when somebody's life is lost to tragedy, and in the case of Nick Reiner, it's tragic too that he threw his life away and killed his own parents allegedly. But I think that President Trump, in the way that he's been attacked, pilloried, made to be, say it this way, you said it's going to be harder for people to look at him with a straight face and not see some sort of monstrous figure based off that X message. Well, guess what? They looked at him that way anyway. Many of the world thinks that he's basically Adolf Hitler. Many of the world think he's Pol Pot or whoever name you want to throw out there. So it really didn't do anything to change his standing or status. But what it did do is back up his position as that fighter.
Right. And to be honest with you, it wasn't in addition to how most people would react to this no matter who said it. I try at times not to be someone that turns on the television to hear what President Trump says so I can curse at him.
Right.
You know, I don't feel that way about him. I have known him personally in the past. I think I told you about the story about being at the Alfred E. Smith dinner with him.
Yes.
And I was complaining about a staff member who had passed away, and Trump couldn't stand this guy. And I knew, well, he knew he'd passed away, but he knew when I brought up his name, he goes, that guy, you couldn't build a treehouse in this city with him trying to stop you with regulations. And the media puts the camera on both of us because both of us were flailing with our hands. Yeah. And Trump, of course, could see that. I couldn't. Trump pulls my hand down, stands right next to me and says, no, there's no problem here. We're talking about an old friend. He just died. We're really upset about an old friend. I thought, wow, you know, he responds to things quickly. And I was, you know, tickled that, you know, I was in this little scenario with him. But the thing is that, and by the way, he didn't just defame the situation once. He came back 4 hours later and did it again. So in other words, he did it 2 times. So whoever was advising him to the contrary was not going to be listened to.
No. And I think, look, the ultimate phrase, the phrase marches to the tune of his own drummer, I think that's kind of overused to an extent. But I think a guy like Trump, it's absolutely true because his game plan and his priorities are typically different than the way other people look at it, especially in politics, right? You're in the middle of this holiday season when most people are looking for positivity and light and upbringing, and there's obviously so much pain right now. We had the Hanukkah terrorist attack a week ago, the Brown shooting a week ago. We talked about Rob Reiner already and his wife. So it's a tough time. But for President Trump, again, marching to the beat of his own drum, we also had this week where it was announced that it's not just the Kennedy Performing Arts Center, but it's the Trump Kennedy Performing Arts Center. Believe me when I tell you, Governor Paterson, I got more than a few text messages this week from friends of mine who are infected with TDS who said, I hate this guy. I can't stand this guy. And then the plaques that they put up at the White House, teasing some past presidents about some foibles or instances of things that they've had. I got to be honest with you. I think it's just more of the same where, if nothing else, President Trump has mastered the ability to stay at the front end of the news cycle, even in this day and age when you can barely stay at the front end of the news cycle for a day. And that's when it's a massive, massive news story, such as an attack or something of that nature. So for Trump to continuously do that, yes, it's sort of answered by all these different content outlets and the social media and the cable news channels that desperately need that information to constantly be reporting on. But it's more than that. It's the way in which he kind of plays the game, pokes the bear, fans the flames, whatever it may be. And a lot of people don't like it, but it's definitely part of his strategy.
Yes. Now, the other issue, which is kind of interesting, is that he signed the legislation to drop the penalties for marijuana from tier 1 to tier 3. Mm-hmm. And there were some people who said they could live with it if it was tier 2, but that tier 2 takes into account a number of activities that you could do with a person who's arrested for possession or use of marijuana in that regard. But there is a tremendous amount of fear, and this is not against Trump himself. It's just against the decision that he made to move it that far down because, according to some medical people I know, he opened the door for other serious addictions that people have from crack and other kinds of barbiturates to a level that would almost encourage people who are like that to continue the way they are.
Mm. Well, I mean, I think that ultimately the question of marijuana and what that's supposed to be in society, and is it something that's a medical drug like for painkillers and appetite increase when somebody's on chemotherapy? We know that that's out there, the medical community being interested in that. I remember years ago talking to a guy who used to play in the NFL, John Ritchie. I'll just mention his name. He was on the Eagles. He was on the Raiders. He co-hosted a show that I worked on for years.
Wow.
And he said that basically when he played football in the 90s, they gave out painkiller pills, right? Like opiate-based pills, whether it's Percocet or something like that.
Right.
Like it was candy. You could go into the trainer's room, get a couple pain pills, no problem. They had no problem giving that to you. But the standards and the rules at that time concerning marijuana were very, very strict. Now, he said what he found was marijuana worked better in terms of managing his pain,
right.
managing his soreness, managing his inflammation, and that's what he preferred to do. It doesn't mean that there isn't downsides to almost any drug, right? Some people like to go out, Governor Paterson, perhaps they're going to do it this evening, have a cocktail. Maybe they're going to have a glass of wine. Maybe they're going to have a little bit of scotch if that's something that they're into. My Nana used to use the phrase.
I'm up for all three.
Yeah, exactly. My Nana used to use the phrase everything in moderation,
Yeah.
And the truth is, whether it's food, whether it's going out and staying up late, whether it's something along the lines of watching a lot of TV, whatever, you can cause yourselves problems by doing almost anything too much. And I think that the gray area kind of falls in with stuff like opiates, right. Fentanyl, for example. Anything that, generally speaking, could kill you that first time kind of raises to a different level. I think we all agree that with that. But the thing about marijuana is there are a lot of people who use it in a responsible way and see it as something akin to a cocktail or akin to having a beer.
On that point, James, stop the presses, hold the phone. I was sitting here, and it was based on some things that you've already said, considering the fact that when Donald Trump was 18, 19, 20, now, of course, he didn't drink, and I guess he knew that people smoked marijuana, and he wasn't going to get involved in that.
Right.
But the people that he may have known used marijuana. And at that time, he probably just thought, well, they say it's illegal because, economics. But, I haven't seen anybody, smoke marijuana and then jump off a roof. That kind of thing.
Right.
Is it possible that he was still thinking of that type of use when he downgraded to level 3?
I think it is possible. I think that the realities of substance use, substance abuse, is that it's kind of spectrum based, right? So a guy like President Trump, to take it back to that Vanity Fair interview we touched on briefly, has said he doesn't feel as though he would be somebody who could ever really effectively drink anything, right? Beer, wine, whatever. We know his brother Fred was an alcoholic and struggled with that until he died.
Yeah.
President Trump basically makes it sound like he thinks he has an addictive personality and that it wouldn't be a good thing for him if he were to drink. There are people who have started to drink and then realized the hard way that they can't do that. There have been people, for sure, people I've known, who have taken it too far with marijuana use, and they almost kind of like, smoke their ambition away, or whatever the phrase is that often gets used. So I think the reality is that there's always going to be nuance in public policy. Governor Paterson, you could probably speak to that. You can't make one law or one statute that's going to perfectly hit every single situation. You try to make one that kind of is the best for the most common situations. And with the amount of money that's going into marijuana cultivation and selling it around the U.S., it's kind of hand in hand with this whole sports gambling thing, which we can kick that to the other side of the break, actually, because I know we got to take a break here. But there was a poll that came out this week. We do have to. We must.
Forget the management, James. You and I are here. Let them come in here and turn the mics off themselves.
They're going to get John Catsimatidis down here to shut us up if they have to.
Oh, that might work.
No, but there's a thing about marijuana where it's obviously a big moneymaker right now. That does have to give you a little bit of pause. Any drug, whether it's pharmaceutical or recreational, obviously has a lot of money behind it, and you have to be wary of that. The sports gambling thing is kind of a similar debate in a way, and that's something I think we can mention on the other side because there was an interesting poll that came out this week.
Okay, so let's go to a few commercial breaks and hear from our kind sponsors, and we'll be back with the left versus the right. David Paterson with the one and only James Flippin, a man who can jump into a talk show even when he was asleep.
Well, I mean, if that woman's not going to come on and represent the right, somebody has
to do it, and you're doing it well.
It's the left versus the right.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back, and thank you for the information and all those messages. They'll be taken into consideration here on the left versus the right. David Paterson with James Flippin. And we're on a roll today. It's just
I mean, look, we're having a good time. The city's all lit up with the holiday trimmings. People are getting their final last bit of shopping done. Let me ask you this, Governor Paterson: do you have a favorite Christmas gift that you've given to someone over the years, that you've received from someone, or do you have a favorite Christmas memory that maybe you can share with our left versus right listeners?
I gave my wife, Mary, a coat about 5 or 6 years ago, and she loved the coat. The point is that if Mary had gone in the store, I'm not sure that she would have felt that way because she is very meticulous, and then she'll show, don't you see how the lines in this suit to make it beautiful? I'm like, I don't even see the suit. So, that was, a great gift that I gave that I really liked. Yeah. And I'd say a gift that I received. Boy, let's go on with the show. I got to think.
It'll come to you. I bet over the course of the program. So before we went, we were talking about the issue of marijuana's legalization and what does that do for society. I'll say this much: it stinks in the sense that here in the city, everybody seems like they're smoking pot all over the place all the time, and that is something that I think society does have to come to grips with, because
it really does.
We made progress on that in terms of, if you want to smoke cigarettes, obviously that's your right, that's your ability, but you got to go to a place where it's accepted, and you can't do it in the restaurant anymore. Obviously, you can't smoke on planes anymore. The concept of a smoking and non-smoking section, depending on how young our listeners are, they'd be like, what the heck is that?
Well, James, even when you mention that, you're on an airplane, there's a smoking section, there's a non-smoking section, but there's a roof on the plane. So the smoke's not going where except down near where your neighbor is sitting.
It's all the smoking section. Yeah, I don't know exactly when that happened. I don't remember ever being on a plane when you were still allowed to smoke cigarettes. I think that was sometime maybe in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, when I was, I would say 70s, when they first when they were still doing it.
Okay.
And of course, that was right after they banned smoking from a lot of other places. Mm-hmm. But the airlines were still doing it for a while.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's some people I know, if you're a heavy smoker, that's a pretty tough thing to imagine going 7-8 hours without having one. But
yeah, it's almost like a withdrawal.
Right. But in terms of the marijuana thing, it just stinks. It's just very, very pungent. And I don't know what we need to do in terms of encouraging the proliferation of lounges or something that have air filters, and maybe that's the only place you can go, and you get hit with a big fine if you do it out in public. I mean, there's a difference between the concept of decriminalization and telling people that it's okay to do it based off the letter of the law, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be able to harass other people, right? Like, you can listen to your music. Doesn't matter if it's heavy metal, doesn't matter if it's hip hop, doesn't matter if it's samba. You get to pick. But you play it above a certain number of decibels, and the cops are going to get called, and they're going to come and give you a noise complaint ticket. So I think we have to get to the point where just because we said it's no longer explicitly illegal, there's still laws and rules in society concerning politeness and not being rude.
I just had a flashback. Late 70s, I'm in my early 20s, and I worked for a company known as Municipal Credit Union. It was a credit union for the city employers. And our job was to call up people who hadn't paid, borrowed money, hadn't paid it back, and to try to persuade them. And,
like a collections agent.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were. And but because of the issue of smoking, they divided the group of us in half, so that half, or close to half, where the people who wanted to smoke were in one room, and the people who didn't want to smoke would be in the other room.
Yeah.
And what was so funny about it is, like, if I had to go and talk to one of my colleagues, maybe they'd gotten the same individual that hadn't paid up, and go in the other room, the smoke was 3 times as bad.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd come out and you'd want to go, like, in the men's room and wash your clothes.
Yeah, take a shower, exactly. No, I mean, there's a few places left, maybe one of them being the casinos down in Atlantic City, where you can still smoke inside, and people say, look, this is not, it's not right. So I think that there are still issues to be figured out with regards to marijuana. We alluded to this with the sports betting thing. A poll came out this week from the NBC News, some partnership NBC News has, and it found that 7 in 10 respondents worry about the integrity of sports amid the proliferation of sports gambling. 7 in 10.
Wow.
Worrying about the integrity. And, of course, we've seen the Major League Baseball players now that have been arrested for this. There have been a couple guys in pro basketball, baseball and football back far enough.
One of the basketball players was apparently working with the, the people who were
the gangsters or whatever,
the gangsters,
mob.
And he had a whole dossier about it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's look, the way we talk about this all the time, Governor Paterson. It's true of almost everything. The internet changed the world in ways that we still haven't really fully grasped. And the proliferation of sports gambling is in many ways that. Because you had to have a bookie once upon a time. You had to make a phone call. You had to go down to the bar. You had to find the guy with the numbers at the end of the bar or whatever and place your bet. Now it's as easy as picking up this thing that's in your palm, hitting a couple buttons, and off you go.
Right.
The issue with the gambling then is, at least we have these algorithms that notice things that are kind of strange. But
like, you can see that someone continues to gamble.
Right. Like, for example, the baseball players, what they did was they would have the ability to bet on one particular pitch. So is this going to be a strike? Is this going to be a ball?
Oh, my God.
You could put thousands of dollars on that. Now the apps are looking to reduce the amount of money that you can bet on that, because in essence, that's where the gamblers were getting it done. They would put $10,000 on this one pitch, right, knowing what that pitch was going to be.
Exactly.
So now at least you have these computers that are almost acting like watchdogs to an extent. But I guess the overarching point is there's still so much that kind of needs to be answered about some of the changes we're making in a bid to be more libertarian or potentially capitalist, I guess.
So, James, before we leave this subject, do you know why Pete Rose didn't get in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I know it was because they said he bet on games while he was managing the Reds.
He bet he was going to get in.
Yeah, they were taking lines up in Cooperstown, and they said, well, what do you think? Oh, Charlie Hustle? And Pete said, I'll bet on that one. Yeah. Well, and we don't have to spend a lot of time talking sports stuff, but I just will say that Pete Rose obviously should be in. So should a guy like Barry Bonds. So should a guy like Roger Clemens. Much like President Trump and how we first had that discussion. So often these places recognizing achievement, it's not about whether or not you're a super nice guy, okay? That's not what it is. It's how effective you are in the arena in which you operate.
Exactly.
And you and I, Governor Paterson, at the end of the day, when we close the mics, we may judge people more on niceness and meanness, and that's an important thing that I think we both think about. But in terms of grading people's craft, not necessarily that important.
So now I'm going to bring up a subject that is really very current, and it has to do with Mayor Adams appointing 4 of the 5 members of the board, whose name I can't remember at the moment. Mm-hmm. And he did that to, in a sense, prevent Mamdani from reversing this.
Yeah.
And inevitably, Mamdani can probably find a way to do this. But but I just think, had that been in reverse, in other words, suppose when President Trump was leaving, he had, messed up a few agencies to make sure Biden couldn't use them as quickly.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's a Democrat, and in this case, frankly, this is a friend of mine. But I don't see how that helps. In other words, if the problem is that we don't like that Mamdani was elected mayor, we can vote him out in 4 years. Mm-hmm. Certainly, the public seemed to have done that to Mayor Adams. So I think this idea of tinkering with government entities right before a change in administration, I don't have the stomach for that.
Yeah, I can understand why you say that. I mean, I think that so often what we've seen in recent years is the way the legal system has been used in this way, right? You have these activist judges who have been put in place by Democrat officials, let's say, and in essence, they're now working to gum up the works of the Trump administration. Any given thing that the Trump White House may look to do, whether it's cutting funding for USAID, putting tariffs in place, enforcing immigration laws that are on the books, there's going to be some sort of judge that's going to try to throw procedural roadblocks in the way. And I don't agree with that. I think that that's extra government. I think that's outside of democracy, and I think it's totally subverting the will of the people. But in this case, you're talking about the Rent Guidelines Board. The fact that Mayor Adams appointed these 4 people to it that I guess are going to be sort of putting some roadblocks in place for Mamdani with wanting to freeze increases for rent-stabilized apartments or whatever. I tend to agree with you. I think that most often the better bet is to allow some leeway for these politicians to actually enact the policies that they want to enact, and then you see what the result is of that. I felt this way going back to the actual campaign, right, where you had a lot of influence, a lot of people, including people here at this radio station, who were so keenly invested in seeing Mamdani not be mayor that they sort of pulled out all the stops to try to come up with an alternative, right? First, it was Mayor Adams, then it was Andrew Cuomo, and obviously neither one of those worked out. The idea was we need to try and stop Mamdani from being mayor because of the implication that he's going to be so bad, that he's going to do so many bad things that the city's going to suffer as a result. There's obviously a lot of truth to that. I would agree with it. I think that the policies that Mamdani is going to put in place probably are not going to be good for New York City. But it's also the popular position right now. In essence, the New York City Council, all the different politicians in Albany. We talk about it with somebody like you, Governor Paterson. We talk about it with somebody like Judge Richard Weinberg. The Democratic Party and its core has kind of shifted increasingly to the left. So a guy like Mamdani is the conclusion, is sort of the natural person that's going to come next and run City Hall. So he's going to have to sink or swim. I think you and I both have an expectation of what that's going to be. But unfortunately for New York City, unfortunately for the political right, there ain't no easy way out. There ain't no easy pathway through. Socialism has and does continue to fail, not just here, but around the world. And you're seeing it now in places like South America. Chile just elected a more conservative leader. Argentina had that happen in the last few years. On a national sense here in the U.S., we know that President Trump was able to beat Kamala Harris. But you still have your Chicagos, your L.A.s, your Portlands, your Bostons, your San Franciscos, and New York City, where because of the demographics, because of the prevailing political culture, you have a lot of work to do. You got a lot of stuff that you're going to have to overcome. And unfortunately, I think that means a little more pain before you really have change.
Well, the other issue is that Election Day was on November 4th. The first day of the new administration will be January 1st. The reason they have left that time is the same thing that they do in a presidential election, which is a little longer, to allow the new administration to come in, to allow the old administration to pack up and get out. But I never thought of it as a time to get your last licks in against a candidate that won that you don't like. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I'm saying this on both sides. That, when the Election Day returns are in, I guess with the exception of 2020 when President Trump didn't think they all came in. But for the most part, that's it. The candidate, the people's choice won. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's not just going at the candidates such as Mamdani, but it's going after everything he represents in this short period of time, which I think only emboldens his supporters to even be more narcissistic, mm-hmm. more unable to understand the public that they serve, and more able to do things that might violate the law.
Yeah, well, it's all unfortunately part of the one-party system here, and it has a lot to do with the way things are perceived and how people think politics should be. Like, it just should be this way because I say, and because I'm with the prevailing party, and that's how it is. So I know we got to take a break. We're being told that we got to take another break. We have to step aside and take a quick break. But I wanted to go back, if we can, Governor Paterson. I know there's a lot to do, but I just wanted to go back to the Rob Reiner situation, not the tweet, not the Trump connection, but the situation itself. When we come back, maybe we could talk about that, and also the Brown University shooting a little bit, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So we'll take a break right now. We'll be back with you in a few minutes. Don't go too far away from the radio. If you have to go to the kitchen, turn it up. We'll be back.
It's the left versus the right.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back on the left versus the right. James Flippin along with David Paterson. And we are in the last stages of the show. And James wanted to talk about some other issues involving not just what happened to Rob Reiner and his wife, but other situations that are analogous.
Yeah,
that'd be a good idea of where you're going.
Yeah, that is a good way to describe it, because in essence, what we're hearing now, Governor Paterson, about the assailant in that horrific stabbing of Rob and Michelle Reiner is that Nick Reiner, their son, had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. That's reporting from TMZ.
Right.
Because since that crime happened, you've heard a lot about how Nick Reiner dealt with homelessness, substance abuse, talking methamphetamine and opiates and heroin and, all really bad stuff, but also mental illness. And I always wondered, okay, well, what's the mental illness? Not like in some macabre way. I'm wanting to know every single detail and being overly curious, but I just want to know, how does that term connect to the violence that we saw. So now that you're hearing about schizophrenia, sadly, anybody who spent any time in the New York City subways knows that schizophrenia is a very debilitating disease, right? It kind of actually just gets worse and worse. Oftentimes when you're not taking care of yourself or taking medication, that's especially true. People who are schizophrenic often will be homeless, will be living in places like public transportation or stations of that nature. And it's loud, it's noisy. Dehydration and improper diet can also exacerbate the effects of schizophrenia. So everything that we've heard about Rob Reiner suggests, or I should say Nick Reiner, suggests that he was sort of going down a dangerous path. We already alluded to the fact that supposedly at this Conan O'Brien Christmas party a week ago, he was in a shouting match with his parents, acting very erratic, being kind of strange with other guests. And yet there was some push potentially to not contact 911. Why is that relevant to what I'm talking about? Well, a source with direct knowledge of Nick, according to some of the reporting that I've seen online, said that he had been under the care of a psychiatrist, was being treated at an L.A. facility that deals with mental illness and substance abuse. Now, this is a place where it's very expensive, Governor Paterson, actually $70,000 a month to be treated at this particular place. So what happened was, as Reiner was dealing with this, Nick Reiner was dealing with this regression into unstable mental illness, the response was from the clinicians that he's becoming erratic and more dangerous, and they discharged him. They discharged him because I guess they felt as though they weren't able to deal with him, that his substance abuse had gotten worse and that his schizophrenia was getting worse. And so they let him out. They released him. My thing is, this is emblematic of a society that is not doing things the right way. California has it all twisted up. A place like New York has it all twisted up, leaving people who are crazy, violent, under the influence of drugs, and just putting them out on the street and saying, oh, well, hope this works out. Nothing we can do about it. Oh, boy, isn't that dangerous? Isn't that bad? Nothing we can do about it. Well, unfortunately, that mindset is the reason Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner are dead. If you want to blame anybody other than Nick Reiner in terms of what happened, it's these misguided, soft policies rooted in virtue signaling that say it's just not right to keep people behind bars. It's just not right to keep people in mental health facilities. It's just not right. Well, who is it not right for? Is it not right for the people that end up getting stabbed or harassed on the subway or pushed in front of a train, or this mom and father who were killed in cold blood by their own child? Who is it not right for? That's what I want to know. Who's the person that their life is being made better by these policies where we say there is no way to deal with mental illness? There is nothing. It's not compassionate to put people into facilities. It's just so misguided, and it's really, really terrible because it's the kind of stuff that is leading to tragedies that could have been avoided.
The previous remarks of Mr. Flippin do not necessarily reflect the views of WABC, John Katsimatidis, or even his partner, Mr. David Paterson.
Yes.
No, actually.
No, that's a good disclaimer, and I appreciate it.
To be honest with you, James, in the early 80s, I worked in the Forensic Psychiatric Bureau of the Queens District Attorney's Office. And our job there, and I was a lawyer practicing under supervision, mm-hmm. and what we did was assess whether or not individuals who were arrested understood the charges made against them or were not able to communicate with their lawyer in a way that they would get a fair defense.
Yeah.
We were under pressure because we would find these people who were just out of it. And because, of the nature of things, we were being pushed to say, just charge them with a D felony. He'll serve 6 months and we won't have to worry about him anymore. But those people serve 6 months and they go out and kill people. Mm. And it was actually a murder, not in New York, but in another state. Might have been Wisconsin, but it was earlier on that ignited the idea of making sure that the the criminals are really criminals, because if they're not, you might have to keep them indefinitely. Why? Because you're trying to save the society from what they might do when they come out.
Yeah, I just think that we've really lost the plot when it comes to our elected officials and the political class and who they think they work for, right? The base level of compassion, caring, understanding as a human would bring you to the conclusion that there are people who are unfortunately dealing with mental illness, dealing with aspects of substance abuse, dealing with various things that are unfortunate. And they've clearly fallen on hard times. And maybe their entire life is going to be some semblance of hard times because of the things that they deal with. That doesn't mean that the entire society gets thrown out with the bathwater. So
Exactly.
And that's the thing that we're seeing happen just too often. Like, for example, right? We don't know exactly what happened at Brown. The shooter there, this guy from Portugal that eventually shot himself in New Hampshire, he's also been blamed for this shooting at MIT. There's two things.
Oh, he shot the doctor?
Yeah. At least that's what cops are saying. That it looks like that's also that he shot the professor at MIT.
Right.
So there was the potential to save a life if they had caught this guy sooner. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself. There's two different things I want to talk about here. One is that supposedly people have said that this shooter at Brown last Saturday, a week ago, shouted out Allahu Akbar before entering this classroom at the engineering school. Now, that hasn't been confirmed. Cops haven't confirmed it. But if it was true, it would have been beneficial to know that. How about on Saturday last week? How about on Sunday? How about so that you can start to put a profile together as to who this could possibly be,
out who it is,
and it's not just some homeless guy who lives in the building's basement and takes to a social media app that eventually solves the case. Okay, because in essence, what that sounds like to me is the virtue signaling that comes with not wanting people to know that this could have been a guy who fits a certain profile when it comes to violent crimes like this. The other thing is, and this is a little more base level, but it still has to be said, these major American universities are completely irresponsible in terms of the amount of money that they have. Period. We had this complaint over the last 12 months about how much grant money is supposed to go to these various Ivy League schools and all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, they're sitting on billions of dollars in their endowment. Brown's endowment is estimated to be somewhere in between $7 and $8 billion. But somehow they didn't have cameras.
Why don't they apply for statehood?
Yeah, they might as well. They might as well be a state within Rhode Island. I mean, why not? My point is that you have so much money, so many resources that there's really no excuse for not hardening these locations to an extent to which you can't get in that building unless you have the proper identification. You can't get in that building without someone noticing that you're there when you shouldn't be. And our producer Elias was telling us, that he went up there to Providence and checked out the campus. He was basically able to get onto the dining hall and potentially could have had a free meal. That's how lax they are. Now, I like the concept that we could think of living in a world where these threats don't exist. Right? I would love that to be the case. You go back 25 years pre-Columbine and the concept of a school shooting was fairly foreign. But in this day and age, for a school like Brown to not have hardened its school locations and then furthermore to not have cameras in a place like the engineering school so we got a clear image of this guy is just the height of irresponsibility. That's not even strong enough to say it that way.
And it really reduces the compassion and the anger that we all feel when one of these types of attacks takes place, particularly when it involves younger people or school institutions or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's terrible when that kind of thing happens. And this person, has their name been brought up yet?
Yeah, it's Claudio. hold on, I'll get it for you, because it's a 48-year-old guy. He is actually originally from, he's dead now, but originally from Portugal. Claudio Neves Valente, from Portugal, apparently knew the MIT professor, may have studied with him. I think they were in the same class. The New York Times, I think, is reporting that.
Right.
And that was the MIT professor who was shot dead. At Brown, it was a 19-year-old, and I think it was two different students, a man and a woman, who were shot dead. The woman, the head of the college Republicans, or the vice president of the college Republicans there at campus. So that's obviously pretty crazy. But furthermore, it could have been a coincidence. There's also been reporting out there that a pro-Israel professor typically occupies that class space. And we do know that the professor who was shot dead at MIT is pro-Israel, was sadly very pro-Israel. So, you know, there's still a lot about this that's going to come out and potentially bring more to light with that whole situation. I just think that everything that went into the investigation, what information was or was put out, the cameras, the inability to stop this guy as he traveled across state lines and killed somebody else allegedly, is really just, it goes to show you that just like with Rob Reiner, Michelle Reiner, and Nick Reiner, yes, individuals are responsible for their actions, but policies and the way that we think about things are also a mitigating factor. And people want to talk about things like gun control. Let's talk about the way we actually treat crime, the way we treat individuals with violent tendencies, and how we're supposed to do that as a society. And
particularly if they're very aware of what they did.
Yeah.
And you know, not faking like there's something wrong with them or something like that.
Right.
By the way, James, just to end up, one of the defendants who I thought was out of his mind gets on the witness stand and answers all the questions correctly. Says his name, says where he lives, says this, that. And now he's really annoying me because I don't want him to be found fit to go to trial.
Yeah, right.
So I start trying to badger him. I'm like, you know something? I really think that you don't know what you're talking about. What do you think of me? And he said, well, I think you're just a guy who's trying to do his job. And I'm like, this guy is killing me. And James, 6 weeks later, I'm walking up Queens Boulevard back to the office, and he's going the other way, and he stops and shakes my hand. I couldn't believe it.
Wow. Well,
that's a story that ends well compared to everything else we've had to talk about.
That's
today.
true. And you know what? You lawyers you can take a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink sometimes, right?
No.
Governor Paterson, this has been great. I know we're almost out of time, but you did your best to badger that client. Just like when you were a budding radio host as a young man, you went by the term badger. But that's for a different show, right?
That's for a different show.
That's a tease. And meanwhile, we're waiting to see what our Mets are going to do in free agency. Maybe John Sterling will tell us.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Merry Christmas, Governor
Merry
Patterson.
Christmas, everybody, and see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Take my word for it. I live there. Come to Florida. Get pre-approved right now with my guy Michael Kotze. Call him at 561-441-2730. He's got Choice Mortgage and a great real estate team. Get pre-approved right now. Michael Kotze, 561-441-2730. Buy in Florida right now. Don't wait. Save money on state taxes. Make your move today with Choice Mortgage. Trust me, Florida is waiting. This guy's so good, he did my commercials in Florida too. Mike Kotze, 561-441-2730. Arrive.